United States District Court in for the Southern District of Florida is now in session. The Honorable James Lawrence King presiding. This morning, we have a sentencing hearing in the matter of United States of America versus Jihad Ali, case number 21, criminal 20109. Counsel, will you please state your name for the record?
Good morning, Your Honor. Jonathan Stratton on behalf of the United States, with me as well as FBI Special Agent Sean Kibbe.
Good morning, Mr. Stratton. For the defense, please.
Good morning, Your Honor. Michael Hersey here for Mr. Ali, who consents to proceeding by Zoom. Good seeing you there, Judge.
Good morning, Mr. Hersey. Good to see you. And thank you for clarifying the requirement that the defendant has to agree to this Zoom hearing. Thank you.
Yes.
I've read and reviewed the entire pre-sentence investigation report and all the pleadings, save and except some documents that were filed this morning, which I've not yet read, or at least they were received by my courtroom deputy this morning, which was an addendum, I think. But basically, it was clear that the parties had reviewed, the lawyers had reviewed the pre-sentence investigation report and had basically no objection with the PSI. And they would announce and discuss that for the defense, Mr. Hersey would present all that at the time that we were considering other motions about the guideline range, etc. With that background, let me inquire, do each of you have any objections, save the part that the defense is going to raise about age and other factors at the sentencing hearing, but on the facts of the PSI and the PSI in general? Does the government have any objections? You said you do not. There are no objections.
That's correct, Your Honor. The government has no objections.
All right. And you therefore believe that their recommended 35-point total offense level with a criminal history category 6 is accurate and correct, with an advisory recommendation of 60 months under the advisory guideline range. You agree with that?
Yes, Your Honor. That is the statutory maximum that the defendant could be sentenced. That's correct.
All right. And Mr. Hersey, any particular specific objections that have not been noted to the PSI? And are you in agreement that this, under the PSI, these are the advisory guideline ranges, the statutory amount of 60 months, total offense level 35, criminal history 6. Is that correct, Mr. Hersey, as far as?
Yes, Judge. Yes, Judge. And to save the court and the government some time, I've talked to Mr. Ali. We waive all of the objections that we previously filed to the PSI, including the one that was filed either late last night or this morning, the addendum. So I've talked to him about those, and we want to waive all our previously filed objections.
Thank you, Mr. Hersey. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Therefore, the court makes as a finding that we're dealing with total offense level 35, criminal history category 6, with the advisory provision of 60 months custody. All right. With that in the background, now I'm aware that you all have been conversing as good professional lawyers do in these matters and have reached an agreement with the government. Tell me about the agreement.
Your Honor, there was an agreement. As Your Honor noted, it's a total offense level of 35, a criminal history category 6. What would that usually dictate is a guideline range of 292 to 365 months. The agreement that was reached between the parties, Your Honor, and the defendant pleading to an information capped his criminal exposure to a total of 60 months. So essentially, a 15-year reduction as to the defendant's criminal exposure. So that's the agreement that was reached. The government is requesting and recommending to the court that the court sentence the defendant to the entirety of that 60-month sentence. But that was the agreement that was reached between the parties that led us to the position we are now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stratton. Mr. Percy, let me invite you to present whatever you wish by way of argument. Well, first to the recommendation of the government, and then we can go forward with your argument. Okay, very good, Judge. Part of the plea agreement, and I thank the government again for letting us have the 5-year count, because it took a lot of negotiations. And I know that Mr. Stratton and the AUSAs here had to go to Washington to get that. And I also conversed with Washington as well to convince them that this was a just thing to do. And with this, we still maintain on the defense side the capability to ask the court to go below the 5 years or 60 months statutory maximum here. And we ask the court to seriously consider sentencing my client, Mr. Ali, to time served. Judge, he's been in custody for, as of today, 30 months and 15 days when one calculates the time he spent in Syria. He was arrested in Syria by U.S. coalition forces, the Marines, put in jail at that time, and he's been in custody since then. Now, he was extradited from Syria to the United States on September 29th of 2020, almost a year to the day exactly from today. So he's been in official U.S. custody for that time. He was in custody in Syria, we would say, under U.S. detention, and he should get credit for that too. Now, Judge, probably you don't have the authority right now to give him credit for time served for that time in Syria. That probably technically is the Attorney General after he gets your sentence, and they can give him credit for time served in Syria. But this court can certainly take that into account, that he's only 20 years of age now. He left the U.S. with his father at age 14. So he was an 8th grader when he went to Syria back in 2017. And so, I'm sorry, that was 2015. And he was arrested when he was 17 years old. He's 20 years old now. So we'd ask the court to take that into consideration when sentencing him. And we have his mother, and you see her there as, I just saw her. And she would like to briefly address the court. And then she's going to describe, there are just a couple of other relatives on there. We're not going to have them speak, but just identify them for the record. And we would ask the court to give him time served so he can return back to his family. So with that, I'd ask Ms. Muhammad, if you could, if it please the court, we'll just have her briefly address you, Judge, as his mother, and she'll identify for the court the other individuals that are on the Zoom conference with us. They will not speak. Joyce, swear the mother, and I presume go ahead and swear the defendant, the two of them at the same time if you can.
Yes. Will you please raise your right hand, mother and Mr. Muhammad? Yes. Mr. Muhammad, you too. Raise your right hand. Mr. Ali, Jihad Ali. Okay.
His name is Jihad.
Jihad, sorry. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you should give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Put your hand down.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Muhammad, can you tell the judge what you want him to consider before he passes sentence on your son?
Yes, I do.
So please go ahead and tell the judge what you want him to hear.
Okay. Your Honor, Judge King, my name is Rosina Muhammad, and I am the biological mother of Jihad Ali. Jihad grew up in a home where he always sought permission for anything that he needed, and he was always respectful and obedient. Jihad is a very kind, loving, caring, responsible child who is loved dearly by his family, his friends, and people in the community. Being the eldest of the 4 children, Jihad would always look out for and seek the best interests of his siblings. Jihad's father and I got divorced when he was just 9 years old, and he was taken from me at that time to live with his dad. Then 6 years ago, at the age of 14, he was taken to Syria without my knowledge. For all this time, up until this day, I have grieved for my son. I worry about him and his safety because he is just a child. He was just a child who had no choice in the matter. Your Honor, I do not expect you or anyone else here to understand because obviously none of you have ever been in this situation. Whatever Jihad did or did not do, I believe it was just to survive. I know he is remorseful, and if given the opportunity, he would do things differently. I ask you, Your Honor, to please have compassion and mercy and grant Jihad his freedom, for he has suffered tremendous tortures in the prisons in Syria for over 1 year and now incarcerated for 1 year at FDC. For the very least, give him the lightest possible sentence so that soon he can be able to come back to Trinidad and be reunited with his family once again.
Hey, thank you, Ms. Muhammad. Can you identify for us the other individuals that are on the monitor that the judge is seeing?
I'm not finished, Mr. Hissey.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and I speak to Jihad on a daily basis, and he's that kind, loving, caring, responsible child. He is even well loved by the inmates at FDC because he's always willing to help or even give the very last of what he has. Jihad is very smart and confident and has the potential to succeed in any endeavors. I take full responsibility for Jihad when he gets back to Trinidad and Tobago. Lastly, Your Honor, for the record, neither Jihad nor myself or anyone else in our family ever indicated that Jihad wished to be counseled by a family ISIS imam in Trinidad. I live here, and in fact, I do not even affiliate myself with that community. I spoke to Jihad's attorney, Mr. Hissey, yesterday, and he indicated to me that paralegal Yunus Ali is the one that told him this. Shortly after, I spoke to Yunus Ali, and he confirmed that he had never spoken to Mr. Hissey. But Mr. Yunus Ali is here today to testify on behalf of Jihad, as well as to discuss, Your Honor, certain matters relating to Jihad after he is sentenced. Also to clear up whatever misunderstanding there is with Mr. Hissey. Thank you very much. I have my mom, Zubaida Muhammad, which is Jihad's grandmother. I have his aunt and his siblings, Aliyah and Nima and Islam. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Judge, at this time, Mr. Ali himself wanted to make some comments to the court.
Mr. Hersey, before that we do that, thank you. Let me professionally make sure that the government, or ask the government, do you have any cross-examination of the witness that just testified, Mrs. Mohammed? Any cross-examination?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hersey, thank you. Would you proceed with your client's testimony?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Mr. Ali, is there anything you want to say to the court before he passes sentence on you?
Just so Mr. Ali knows, his mic is muted.
Oh, that's right, Mr. Ali. You have to either hit it yourself or ask the guard there to put your volume on.
Are you
It's
still
going to take about
there?
30 seconds, sir, before I...
Okay, Mr. Ali, we can hear you now. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah.
Okay, keep your voice up and please tell the judge what you want him to consider before he passes sentence on you.
Today I am before the court to be sentenced. It is for the charge of terrorism, although I've never hurt anyone. I've looked in the dictionary for the word terrorism and still don't understand it or how it relates to me. I asked my lawyer and what he said didn't make sense to me. What makes me a terrorist? My beliefs, my skin color, voluntarily want to live under Islamic law. I admit to living under the Islamic Caliphate, which is not as the news shows it to be. The Caliphate was not only for Muslims. There were Christian Jews who choose to live there, and from what I've seen, they were happy to be there. I never saw anyone murdered, robbed, or raped over there. There was no drug or alcohol addiction. I was married to a British Muslim woman who is now in a Syrian refugee camp, controlled by some of the worst people I've ever seen in my life, the Kurds. Me and my wife tried to have kids, and every time it was a miscarriage or the baby died at birth. Why? She was afraid all of the time. Of who? Of the planes above bombing with the most deadliest weapons known to man. Every second of every day towards the end, she was terrified of me stepping out and being turned into a pile of body parts. Terrified of being captured and raped and killed like many of my other Muslim sisters. After an airstrike, I would go out to check for survivors and injured. I once saw a young kid crying and screaming, "Mommy, mommy," while being held in his mother's arms. She was sitting up dead and her blood was pouring on the baby. My stepdaughter, a 2-year-old infant, who was murdered in cold blood with no remorse. Is this not terrorism? I ask because I am confused. Why the people who do evil things are not called a terrorist, but I am being called a terrorist simply for moving with my family to the Islamic State. The people they call a terrorist are the same people who comes to save us when the coalition forces are terrorizing us, and they help the injured and take care of that same crying baby. I don't say that they were perfect, but it wasn't always like that. I remember the ice cream shop in Raqqa, where we used to buy sweets and ice cream for us and other kids and hang out. The ice cream shop is no longer there because a coalition bomb hit it. It was an old Arab man who was not part of ISIS who owned the store. I don't know why they destroyed it. The same for a children's school I used to go to. They destroyed it with one of the biggest bombs I've ever seen in my life. Is selling ice cream to kids or going to school something bad? Perhaps I'm supposed to ask for mercy now and take my lawyer's advice and pin everything on my dad, my father. So what I'm supposed to do? Sit here and paint a picture of that man as a monster? A father who tried to do what he believed was best for his family. A man who has one son also in jail and another in foster care taken by the government and blocked from returning home to his mother in Trinidad. A man whose wife and children live in a Syrian refugee camp in starvation and despair. A man who never carried arms but carried love in his heart and buying medicine and food for those who had none. A man who went out bravely in the middle of bombing to save children at risk of being annihilated. A man who brought cheer to those who were down and never fired a shot in anger. Maybe this is not the man they wish to understand. They prefer him a radical, terrorist, monster, or villain. I admit to being brought to Syria as a minor. I don't admit to my father being a terrorist or evil man, and I don't admit to any medical disorder. I admit to the pain I feel in my heart, the pain or suffering which anyone has been afflicted by. If hearts are not softened on their own, then no amount of speech will ever affect it or cause it to shed tears. If mine isn't a sad story, then I can't even expect to convince someone otherwise. I simply request understanding.
I think that's okay. Ms. Muhammad, did you tell the judge who the other people are, like the grandmother, for example?
Yes, I did. I have my mom, Jihad's grandmother. I have his sister and his brother, his aunt.
Okay, and I said, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Judge. That ends my presentation for the moment.
Okay, can we move the jail again, please?
What we want cross-examination here, if any.
Your Honor, the government doesn't have cross-examination for the defendant. I don't think it's a good use of everyone's time, but I do have tremendous response if the court would have let me at the appropriate time to respond to a lot of the things that the defendant just stated. That gives the government significant concern about his dangerousness, his lack of remorse, and his responsibility for his acts and conduct while he was in Syria.
You will certainly have time to speak in the sentencing aspect. This was simply if you had anything you thought you'd wish to cross at this point. I wanted to make sure that both sides had a fair opportunity to conduct this evidentiary hearing. The defendant appeared to be reading from a document, and I do not say that critically. I simply say that I neglected to mention earlier that I had read a letter that the defendant sent to me, and many of the things he touched on in his statement, Mr. Hersey, and to his mother, Mrs. Mohammed, were familiar from the letter that I had read. And it may be the same document, but I want him to know, his parents to know, and defense counsel and government to know that I had read all of the documents submitted to me prior to this hearing. So therefore, and including the government's response to the well-written documents by the defense on behalf of the defendant. So I will move on then, unless there are any other witnesses, Mr. Hershey, you believe there's a need to call to open it to argument on your motion to depart downward from the guidelines and your argument. Mr. Hershey, any other witnesses?
Thank you, Judge, for having read those documents in advance and for the letters from his family and friends. But I have no further witnesses or evidence at this point.
Good. All right. Does the government have any responsive witnesses to the motion, the defendant's motion to depart downward from the guidelines?
No, Your Honor.
Good. All right. Then at this point in time, I will invite the parties to state their positions. Let's see. Actually, the government has brought to my attention Section 5K2.13 about departure from the guideline range, where the Sentencing Guidelines Commission and the sections of the statute, Section 5K2.13, expressly direct the court not to depart if the facts and circumstances indicate that the offense there's a need to protect the public interest because the offense involved actual violence. You probably would have or may have something to say on that issue, but it seems to me under the facts of this case that that provision really comes into play in this case, where there was, from the facts of the PSI, undoubtedly actual violence by the defendant by his firing of an AK-47 weapon at the coalition forces in Syria, which led to his ultimate capture and confinement by the military in Syria during what appears to be the battleground of a war going on over there. The other facts indicate that the defendant, as an adult, was participating in the war and made public statements regarding in Syria that he was actually a fighter for ISIS, and therefore was that brought credit on him and his family there, or may have, at least that may have been the reason he did this. His age is a factor in all this, but because of this, I believe I should deny the motion to depart from the guidelines and am inclined to consider your argument now on any arguments pro or con about the guidelines that either side wish to make regarding what the sentence should be. But I respect the experience of lawyers. I respect and know Mr. Hershey is a very competent, experienced attorney, and would observe that he has exercised himself together with what appears to be an understanding attitude of certainly counsel for the defense and the Department of Defense, Mr. Stratton, regarding his age and these other factors. So, although there is still open the question whether or not there would be an upward departure given the seriousness of these allegations and the fact that it comes before me at this point as a guilty plea to an information on these other factors which you have so thoroughly, both of you, outlined in excellent pleadings. I'm sort of inclined to approve the agreement you have made and not depart upward or downward. With that announcement, and not wishing to interfere with your, I'm sure, well-prepared arguments for me, I will open it to your arguments at this time. And I can start with either one, but let me, I guess, start with the government in this particular case, since Mr. Stratton has referred to it once before. He had some things he wished to state with regard to the pleadings and other remarks. All right, Mr. Stratton, you've heard my inclination at this point, but I'll be pleased to listen to you, followed by Mr. Hershey when you finish. Mr. Stratton.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I'll keep it brief because I think Your Honor's inclinations are correct. And I think a 60-month sentence is appropriate. So I don't want to steer Your Honor away from that ultimate outcome. Your Honor is absolutely right that the defendant, as an adult, conducted military operations on behalf of ISIS. The defendant mentioned in his remarks, what is terrorism? The terroristic acts of ISIS are well documented. The atrocities are well documented. He supported that organization that beheads journalists, that throws homosexuals off the top of buildings. That is terrorism. It is almost as if the defendant is trying to implicate that the United States, in some level, is the actual terrorist. That gives the government significant concern about A, the defendant's remorse, and B, the defendant's acceptance of responsibility. I went to significant lengths to get this defendant a 5-year agreement. He was originally facing 20 years incarceration, and in fact, his appropriate guideline range recommends a period of over 20 years of incarceration. I have significant concerns now, based on the defendant's remarks, if that was the right thing to do. Because the defendant, moreover, indicated that his attorney instructed him to blame his father and that he has no intention of doing so, and in fact takes full responsibility for his actions while in Syria, which included firing on coalition forces, which included conducting military operations, which included becoming a supply manager for an ISIS battalion. It also included military training. It also included religious training. So if the defendant is accepting full responsibility for all of those actions, a 5-year sentence is under representing his criminal conduct. But, Your Honor, we will stand by the agreement that we had before and your inclinations, and we will recommend a 5-year sentence. But his remarks, as I say, gives me significant concern about the defense remorse, although it does indicate he takes full responsibility for supporting a terrorist organization whose atrocities are well documented. And I don't think I need to expand on that further here. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Stratton. Mr. Hersey, I'll be pleased to hear from you on behalf of the defendant.
Very good, Judge. Just very briefly, even as he stands before the court today, he's 20 years old, and sometimes, Judge, you and I both know that sometimes 20-year-olds see the big picture of things. We do appreciate what the government did in giving us the 5-year max, and I worked very hard with Mr. Stratton and saw many of his efforts to get that. So that is not lost on either myself or my client. I would just remind the court that he was 14 years old when he left, and you can imagine, Judge, when you're 14 and you're following your father's lead, that's what happens. His father loved him, and he loves his father still. They have a great relationship. But as a 14-year-old, you can take that into account that he was doing as his father asked him to do. And he was arrested as a 17-year-old, which still is not the age of majority. So he was still a minor, even when he was arrested on the battlefield there in Syria. So in light of the fact, Judge, that he has spent 30 months of his life in detention now, so that's about 1/6 of his whole life in incarceration. We'd ask the court to consider that, because you do have the authority under Booker, Judge, to give a variance a little bit under the 5. So this man can get back on track, be reunited with his family, and continue his education. His education stopped at 8th grade, and so he's been trying to take some classes while he's there at FDC, and he is admired by the people at FDC because they see his tender heart, and a lot of the older inmates have reached out to him to help him because they realize that he's just kind of a kid in their group. So we would ask the court to consider that and do a downward variance to time served. And if you, whatever you do with that, Judge, we'd ask that in your judgment and commitment order, you make a that you find that he should get credit for the time in Syria from the 2017 arrest until he was extradited. So that would be an extra 18 months. And when the Attorney General makes his decision as to how much credit for time served, he would give your recommendation great weight. Thank you, Your Honor, as always.
All right. Anything in brief rebuttal by the government?
Your Honor, just two quick things. One is that the defendant surrendered to Syrian defense forces in Syria. He was not transported or taken into U.S. custody until 2019. So I think a 60-month sentence is appropriate. As defense counsel alluded to, it is ultimately the Bureau of Prisons' determination as to how much time served he will get for that. But I think Your Honor's judgment of 60 months is appropriate. And then finally, and I'll just make this point briefly, there's a lot of discussion about the defendant's mother looking out for him or taking care of him and being reunited with his family. It is a significant question whether the defendant will ever be allowed back into Trinidad and Tobago. The Trinidadian government has made it clear that they are not taking back terrorists that fought in Syria, and I don't anticipate that changing. So I would just suggest to Your Honor that the defendant at the end of his sentence will be probably remain in the United States and will continue to present a danger to the community. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. The motion to depart below the sentencing guidelines is denied. The court has carefully considered the pleadings and the statements of the parties, including the letter that I received from the defendant, which I have ordered the clerk to put or post in the docket record, the docket sheet of this case. And I've carefully reviewed and gone back and reread Title 18 U.S. Code Section 3553 and the 8 different factors there. I say that because normally I have that after having sentenced, well, there are some indication thousands of defendants. The AO has, the administrative office has indicated I may have had as many as 6,000 defendants come before me in the last 50 years. So Mr. Hershey's been on a few of those, maybe many of them. Yeah. But and Mr. Stratton, with a good career in the U.S. Attorney, will also, hopefully, if all goes well, will be before me again.
Fingers crossed, Your Honor.
I'm sorry. Oh, well,
I have my fingers crossed.
Well, point being that the seriousness of this case may be one of the most serious that the court has really considered, in that it's a direct involvement with somebody that has, at a very young age, with a very, very tragic background as a kid growing up with a father who obviously is very, very imbued with the ISIS fighters and the ISIS principles of fighting against, in the battlefield, against Americans who have a direct enemy fighting on the battlefield, which is about as serious as a case can get. The court does not mention this in any way to suggest that the government's evaluation and ultimately agreeing to an information is in any way a wrong decision. I do not make any fact finding on that except to say that it impresses the court with 2 factors. One, the expertise and diligence with which Mr. Hersey has brought to the defense of his client, which he always does, and the care, consideration, and thought that obviously many persons in the Department of Justice sparked and driven by Mr. Stratton's evaluation of the background of this case, which has also persuaded the court to sentence within the guideline range and not depart upwards. Now, I say all that because there may be a tendency by those who pick up work that we do here in the federal court and make some comment on it at some future date in the press or radio or what. I hope that does not happen. I would wish it never happened. Sometimes I wish to compliment judges and sometimes I don't. But judges don't need any compliments. At least this judge certainly has proven in 50 years that I'm not looking to be concerned about compliments from how my decisions are formulated. I do it as in the best possible way I can within the facts as I find them. But and so therefore, I want to make that clear from the standpoint of the Department of Defense, of Justice. And I've gone through these, and because this is such a serious case, and given a lot of thought and consideration to the tragic, terrible upbringing the defendant was subjected to for the 14 years before he went to Syria when he was 14. And over there, what he has been subjected to by the public and the public comments and the attitude of the Syrians and so on. It's tragic, tragic, tragic. And my inclination was to sentence him above the guideline range. But taking all of these factors and finding that he's had a tragic upbringing under the domination of his father, apparently, both here and when he got to Syria. I'm impressed with his mother's eloquent and very concise, very competent talk on his behalf. And these factors all bring me to the conclusion that even though this is a case that the court might well have sentenced at a higher range, I do intend to follow the 8 considerations of Title 18 U.S. Code 3553 and find that this is a fair and proper sentence for the defendant. The defendant will stand, and I say to you, Jihad Ali, that after consideration of all the factors in the case, that it is the court finds, number one, that you're unable to pay a fine, therefore no fine is imposed. It's a judgment of the court that you, Jihad Muhammad Ali, be committed to the Bureau of Prisons for a period of 60 months, followed by 3 years supervised release, during which you shall comply with all mandatory and standard conditions of supervised release, including not committing any crimes, not possessing a firearm or other dangerous device, not unlawfully possessing a controlled substance, and cooperate in the collection of DNA evidence. The defendant shall comply with further treatment while incarcerated for mental health, permissible search, and the mental health is treatment in custody. But as part of the 3 years supervised release, permissible search, any unpaid restitution fines or special assessments, as noted in Part F of the pre-sentence report. And the court orders that he pay the $100 assessment mandated by law. No fine, but mandated by law, the $100 assessment. Now, under U.S. versus Jones, I ask defense and government if you have any objection to the sentence or the manner in which it was pronounced. That's U.S. v. Jones, Judge Shofat's opinion of 30 years ago. I ask it in every case. Any objection to the findings of fact or sentence in the manner in which is imposed by me on the record for the government?
Nothing from the government, Your Honor. Thank you.
Mr. Hersey.
Judge, just for purposes of the record, we would object to the court not granting the Booker variance.
Yes, of course. And I meant to say that anything and everything said on behalf of the defense or the government is fully preserved in this record and shall be considered by the court, was considered by the court, without the necessity of retaining or jurisdiction to argue it should the defendant desire to take an appeal, which he's advised he must take within 14 days. If he can't afford a lawyer, upon appropriate showing, one will be appointed for him. All right. And everything that Mr. Hershey said and Mr. Stratton said is in the record. And whether you touch on it again by way of this Jones objection or not, the defendant is fully protected by raising it on appeal, should he so elect. All right. Are there any
Your Honor,
motions?
can I just clarify? I just want to clarify
Well,
that.
before you open your mouth, wait till I finish. I'm talking.
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Just wait a minute. I now have reached the point where I will ask the defendant if he has any motions through counsel to make regarding a place of consignment. I have considered and determined that I will, that as far as the motion for the time that he served after he surrendered to U.S. forces in Syria, I will not make any recommendations on that. With regard to the question of a place for his confinement, do you have, Mr. Hershey, a motion as to a recommendation you wish me to make regarding place of confinement, which we all know is up to the Bureau of Prisons? Mr. Hershey.
Yes, Judge, thank you. And I told Mr. Ali that the court can only make a recommendation that's not binding on the Bureau of Prisons, but they always respect what you say, Judge, and they try to do that. And in light of that, I've talked to Mr. Ali and his mother. Our first choice would be Miami. And if that isn't possible, we'd ask that he be designated to Atlanta. He has a sister in the Atlanta area that would be able to visit him. So that would be our two choices, Judge. The first one is Miami. Second is Atlanta.
Thank you. That motion without objection, I'm sure by the government, is granted. If the government has objections, so state, but I will recommend to the Bureau of Prisons, number one, the facility in Miami, Florida, and number two, the facility in Atlanta, for the reasons just stated about visitation by relatives. That motion is granted.
Thank you very much, Judge.
I'm sorry.
Thank you very much for that. We appreciate it.
All right. Now then, does the government does the probation officer have anything that you think I did not cover that you want to bring to my attention at this time?
No, Your Honor. I just wanted to clarify. I know you mentioned mental health while he was in custody, and I just wanted to clarify that it is not a condition of supervised release.
That his custody has nothing to do with supervised release. Supervised release becomes effective, has in the last 1,000 or so times I've done this, after he gets out.
Yes, Your Honor.
Apply for it and all that, but that's later. That's nothing to do with sentencing. All right. I'm finished with this, and I wish to. I've already stated a comment about the lawyers. Both lawyers, I wish to say, have done a very excellent job in what is a very difficult case for them. Perhaps not as much for me, given the fact I've done this for 50 years. So, but nevertheless, I compliment you on that. And at this point in time, Joyce, unless you have something else, I am going to close my part, and the hearing is finished. Joyce?
Okay, court is in recess.
Okay, thanks again, Judge. We appreciate it. Great seeing you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Studd.
Goodbye, everyone.
For several years, you have often heard about Trinidadians heading to Syria to fight for ISIS in its prime. When the terrorist organization swept across Iraq and parts of Syria between 2014 and 2019, some Trinidadians heeded a call to jihad. Two of those who were captured and later taken back to the US, where they faced a court late last year, revealed not only their experience, but the startling revelation that relatives right here were sending money to these ISIS fighters. In 2014, the terrorist organization ISIS gained prominence across the world when it drove Iraqi forces out of several cities in western Iraq. By December 2015, ISIS had stretched its territorial dominance to eastern parts of Syria. The terrorism organization used its ideology of a caliphate to claim religious, political, and military authority over Muslims worldwide. The lure of the terrorist entity attracted many Trinidadian men who left for Syria mainly in the years 2014 to 2018. In several cases, many of them took their families. In 2016, former commander of the U.S. Southern Command, General John Kelly, stood before the 114th Congressional Senate Armed Services Committee and spoke openly about ISIS fighters and the fact there were more than 100 Trinidadians fighting for ISIS, the highest per capita in the Caribbean. General Kelly expressed concern about what this could mean to the security of the USA if these fighters returned home, since they possessed operational experience and ties to global extremists. Investigative work done by this journalist over the years exposed several Trinidadians who ventured to Syria and Iraq in the past, their military training, and in some cases how they would have received money while fighting for ISIS. Among the popular names that featured in several reports were Shane Crawford and John Milton Algernon, to name a few. In March 2019, Trinidadian Imran Ali, aka Abu Jihad TNT, and his son Jihad Muhammad Ali, aka Abu Dujana, surrendered to Syrian defense forces in the town of Baghouz in Syria and were later taken back to the US to face charges that were later reported in the US and our local media last year. Both men the US government said were charged with providing material support and resources to a designated foreign terrorist organization, to wit, personnel in violation of Title 18 US Code Section 2339B. Imran's charge mainly hinged on knowingly providing and attempting to provide support to ISIS, while his US-born son Jihad was faced with conspiring to provide support. In early May, his son pleaded guilty before Florida District Court and will be sentenced at a later date, while his father's court matter is yet to be called. But in US court documents obtained concerning both men, it revealed some disturbing trends about their experience in Syria and Iraq and how interconnected they were not only to Trinidadian ISIS fighters there, but according to their statements given to FBI agent Jason Daly Kofi that was submitted to the court, they also helped to finance terror-related activities with relatives of Trinidadians. In a voluntary interview with the FBI agents, Imran said in December 2014, he listened to the lecture of Anwar al-Awlaki online. Awlaki, who possessed dual citizenship for the US and Yemen, and a key organizer of Al-Qaeda, used the internet to post sermons and blog entries in which he justified conducting violent jihad against the US. Awlaki, branded a global terrorist by the US government, was killed in 2011 in a drone strike. With that acting as his calling, Imran Ali told the FBI that he left in March 2015 with his son Jihad and other children and his second wife from Trinidad to go to Syria, going through Brazil, then finding his way to Turkey. He met a contact in the Turkish town of Gaziantep, who ensured they all crossed the border to join ISIS. Ali told FBI agents that he and his son spent some time doing military training in September 2015 using AK-47s, machine guns and rocket launchers before he was assigned to Katiba, a battalion named after Anwar al-Awlaki. After a near-death experience in Shaddadi, Syria, in which 30 to 40 members of his battalion died, Ali complained of feeling unwell because he was scared. He was later treated and discharged from the battalion after 3 months. While he continued to work for ISIS in Raqqa and bought and sold goods for a profit, he made another disturbing confession in which he stated he provided money remitting services to other Trinidadian ISIS fighters. For a fee of 15%, Ali used a contact in Trinidad and Tobago who collected money from relatives of ISIS fighters, then sent the money using Western Union to Hawala, informal money remitter, dealer who operated between Turkey and Syria, who then delivered money to Ali for an 8 to 10% fee. This startling revelation showed a direct link with Trinidadians living right here, knowingly funding the terrorist organization ISIS by sending money to their relatives who they knew were fighting for this radicalized group. Ali said he stayed in Raqqa till the end of 2017 and later moved to the town of Mayadeen before later moving to Hajin, which also came under attack, forcing him to move again with his family to Al-Shashafa, Syria. While in Al-Shashafa, Ali said he ran a store and donated goods and food from his store to Trinidadian ISIS members in that town. When ISIS was attacked in Al-Shashafa, Ali said he moved to Baghouz, where he spoke with other Trinidadian members whether they should surrender to Syrian Democratic Forces, but he decided against this. It was on March 17, 2019 that he and his son Jihad and other relatives surrendered to Syrian forces. The U.S. Department of Defense said they recovered numerous pieces of evidence that corroborate Ali's role as a member of ISIS. For example, a handwritten in Arabic logbook recovered in Syria contains the list of females who joined ISIS in Syria with dates ranging from February 20th, 2015 through March 27th, 2015. The logbook contained the name of Ali's wife, Sulema Abdul Aziz from Trinidad and Tobago, according to the court document, and other names. Imran's son, who was born in the U.S. according to the court documents, moved back with his father to Trinidad in 2008 before they decided to leave for Syria in 2015. Jihad told the FBI agents his father Imran asked him and other siblings if they wanted to join ISIS, and he responded in the affirmative. Asked by the FBI if he wanted to say no to his father, Jihad at the age of 14 then said he was excited to go somewhere new and see the world. Jihad, like his father, describes the intense military training he was put through, learning how to use rocket launchers, AK-47 rifles. Unlike his father, Jihad told the FBI he was hesitant to attend the military sessions. Jihad told agents that his father made him attend the training, and he did not initially want to attend the training because he was scared to be separated from his family. Jihad described some of his training as cool and other portions as scary. Incidentally, Jihad said he communicated via WhatsApp with his mother, who was in Trinidad since his father had remarried, and told his mother in 2018 they conducted an attack against Syrian Democratic Forces on the Sham side of the Euphrates River. Jihad was 17 years old at the time when asked by FBI agents about the WhatsApp message. Jihad said he was listening to radio traffic from the attacks, but was not directly participating in the fighting. Jihad claimed he used the rhetoric to impress other fighters near him. But later in the interview, Jihad did admit to opening fire and laying down cover for ISIS fighters after they were attacked by Syrian forces. He told the FBI agents. Jihad admitted in his interview that he fired his AK-47 rifle on behalf of ISIS when they were attacked by ground forces and a Syrian regime helicopter in Shemaya during an ISIS operation. Jihad explained that he provided cover fire against ground forces down a road outside a house, firing 1 or 2 magazines of his AK-47 rifle in small bursts. Jihad also told the FBI that he created a Facebook account and posted several messages on it endorsing ISIS and its violent philosophy. What Jihad's Facebook account also revealed, according to FBI inquiries and revealed in the court document, was an open friends list in which it showed he was a friend of a relative and a young woman who attended the Booz Settlement Mosque in Rio Claro, Trinidad, with Jihad prior to his travel to Syria. That mosque has been predominantly on the radar of U.S. officials, but Imam Nazim for several years has denied any involvement with ISIS in several interviews with both foreign and the local media. We spoke with Dr. Melissa Figaro Neptune, a criminologist and a lecturer at UWI who studied at Miami University and did significant research on violent extremism, working closely at times with U.S. officials. She touched on the key revelations made by the Alis, including the remittance payments, the psychological impact this kind of environment could have on young children and teenagers, and the radical online teachings that wooed many male Trinidadians in the past.
One of the things that Mr. Ephraim Ali raised in his statement to the FBI was of serious concern involving remittance by Trinidadian relatives who would send monies through him to Western Union and then onto another source, and he would send it to them. Clearly, this is something that is viewed as somewhat of a way of helping to finance this terrorist organization. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's alarming because despite having all this legislation put in place regarding financing, there's still support for terrorist acts within Trinidad and Tobago. And I think we shouldn't take this lightly. So we have now individuals within our country, they're actually doing covert ways of sending money to finance these organizations. So this means that we still have a vibrant extremist population within our country who believe in these radical acts. So I don't know if this is one indication for us to actually look deeper into how, where, and who is financing these terrorist organizations and to what extent. And if we need to revise any legislation regarding that. Because I know at different channels, we have smugglers who send money across the border, which is an old way of doing things where you have cash. But now we have people legitimately using like PayPal and Western Union to send money. And now we have even bigger now, the FBI have been looking into money laundering into these organizations, especially ISIS. And if Trinidadians are involved, I mean, this is very alarming. And I think there should be a deeper investigation into the extent to which we are actually involved in financing our resources to these organizations.
And then there's that's how you said that some people might not knowingly know that they're doing this. Can you just explain that quickly?
So what happened, there's always a middle person. So you might be thinking you're sending Western Union money to a relative or somebody, just an account, and that account actually may be attached to these terrorist organizations. So it may be unknowing to them, like they're sending money to a relative who some may know that their relative is involved in these acts, but they may actually trying to assist them in any type of way. And this will be unknown to them. And because there is an unknown middle person who collects the money and actually funnels it into these countries, especially the Middle Eastern countries, and through there, they actually get it to these organizations. So there's always different channels in which you could actually get finance transferred to the terrorist organizations. So in that way, some people just unknowingly do it, but they are also still financing, and they could be in a lot of hot water for some type of actions like this. So you just have to be more aware of how these transactions are actually happening and who is actually involved.
Right. Now, secondly, the son of Mr. Ali, who was also indicted in the US and pleaded guilty about a month ago, also indicated that, he had to go through military type training and so on. And obviously at that young age of 14 years, there is the psychological and emotional scar. How are these young men who have now left Syria, who have been brought back, arrested or going to be repatriated to their country, how are they going to reintegrate? What kind of psychological and emotional or even mental impact that will have on them and the society that they re-enter?
Right. So this is one of the things that I have been studying deeply because I'm actually doing a paper on it. We extracted 2 young boys a couple of years ago, and this is what piqued my interest in young people being involved and embedded in the environment of radicalized behavior. And that is problematic. That is very problematic in a sense because, one, it's not only their involvement and their exposure to that type of environment, is the ideology behind it. So you have them understanding that jihad is the way of life and holy war, and this is indoctrinated in them. This is a way of thinking. The rhetoric is something that is embedded. Just like we learn manners as children, they learn this is the way of life. And I think that is one of the more problematic things. So the ideology behind it. But secondly, of course, there's the military training. They're involved in weaponry, arms, ammunition training, and they have been exposed to the extreme case of violence. So coming back, being extracted and being repatriated, it's going to be a tough task because you don't know if they're really victimized because of their mental state, if this is the way that they think, because they could be considered victims because of their age group. But they might think it necessary to be violent. They might have tendencies to be violent psychologically. But then there's some who didn't want to be involved, and they're old enough to know that violence was not the way, or not the way to react to things. So it really is challenging to know who really has a tendency to promote violent acts, who's really remorseful, who are really victims as young people. Removing this idea of violence, removing the idea of this rhetoric of holy war is very difficult. But also you have those who would experience like this post-traumatic stress because of the violence they've been exposed to, especially if they were involved in the atrocities, warfare, all these exposure to bombs and violence and the warfare itself. So it is difficult, I think, to find the underpinnings of what could help resolve the situation. I think monitoring throughout their stay, once they've been repatriated, getting them the necessary counseling. But there's no research that shows it has been effective or it hasn't been effective. So it will be a give and take. It will be up in arms to see whether it's pragmatic or not, to give them that type of counseling.
Thank you so much. And the third thing, one of the things that the father raised in his interview with FBI agents was the fact that he had listened to lectures from Anwar al-Awlaki, who was killed in a drone strike by the US in 2011, and one of those people who are the key organizers of Al-Qaeda. Can you give us an idea? Because I seen that there were a lot of Trinidadians who apparently also looked online for clerics and all these people that might have influenced their way of thinking of wanting to actually go.
Right. So I did a host of interviews in 2018, and that was one of my top questions to people who actually had family involved, knew of somebody who went or went themselves. So there's a lot of confidentiality with regards to those interviews. But one of the things, one of the individuals, it struck me a lot that a young person who left because they want to find a greater sense of life and meaning and be more involved in the Islamic world. And he listened to lectures, he and his family listened to lectures online. So they tapped into a lot of chats and talk, and there were a lot of things that were encrypted online, so they couldn't really, we can't tap into it in the conventional sense, but they will have people who they will be able to listen to and give them information about radicalization and about the extremist way of thinking and Islam, the idea of the paradise and martyrdom. So they have people who are vulnerable, especially it was a vulnerable group of Black individuals, Black young men in Trinidad and Tobago specifically, who were targeted with these lectures. But there also was the use of the internet. And what was really, really alarming was the use of resources in Trinidad and Tobago. A lot of people said guest speakers will come to the mosque. Imams were very much invested in showing them the way that they should go with regards to supporting Syria, supporting ISIS, supporting these organizations. So I think the recruitment process itself, it is actually one physically in Trinidad and Tobago. There are individuals who support the idea of this radicalized behavior, extremist violence, but there's also those who are very curious and those who will want to be more strong in their faith religiously. They actually are interested, so they go online. There was one reported by the FBI, internet site, Ask FM, where people would actually go to actually introduce themselves and want to be involved, and they could talk to them on private chats. So these things were not even identified by the FBI prior to people coming to them about these websites and these avenues to get information about joining these organizations. So there are avenues, but there's also the fact that, and this was raised in one of the interviews, there are individuals who would really, really try to want to become involved in something that is extreme. They may not be very religious, but they're just trying to find avenues in order to become a little bit more relevant. And this was actually very true for one of the people I interviewed. So there's access on the internet, there's access in Trinidad, and there's also access through friends and family. People unknowingly just got involved because they are acquainted with individuals who want to become part of these organizations.
An imam who spoke to Unspun on the condition of anonymity also chimed in on the pertinent issues raised in the confessions of the allies to FBI agents. He said in reference to the children returning from Syria, open quote, some children would have known why they were going to Iraq and Syria, but none of them would have properly understood why, as no amount of theory can prepare any child for what they eventually experience. The effects that this would have on their psyche of the children would vary, but no doubt all would need different levels of counseling and support in order for proper reintegration. On the point of people sending money to Trinidadian ISIS fighters from here, he said, of course people would have sent monies to family and friends with full knowledge. However, some would have gotten monies from ordinary Muslims just paying their zakat without the knowledge of where their zakat ended up. A truly eye-opening account of the harsh situations experienced by survivors and escapees of this Islamic extremist group, a group whose reach extends across the globe and is affecting us here in Trinidad and Tobago. Don't go anywhere, much more up next.
Did you know that